So my dad was always in my life, but he wasn't in my home.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always say things like trying to take me to another level, but he never acknowledged where I was,
Okay.
if that makes sense. And so I
It does.
always felt like where I was wasn't enough. I always felt like it wasn't good enough. I always felt like I should have been thinking about more or wanting to do more because he never celebrated where I was.
Welcome to another episode of Becoming with Angelina Watkins, where we are turning dreamers into believers and doers through open and transparent stories and lives of those who have overcome adversity to walk in their purpose, achieve success, and live a life fulfilled on their terms. We have candid conversations with women and men from all walks of life, giving us a fresh perspective and the blueprint on how to win at love, life, and money. I'm Angelina Watkins, and in this episode, we have Marquita, who is passionate about seeing women reach their full potential and help push them into their purpose through her Transform and SOAR Academy. Now, Marquita, you also have a company you co-own with your husband as well, where you all help married couples to strengthen their marriage and their finances. I can't wait to talk about that. And you've written 3 books. And so I want to get into all that. So first, I want to thank you so much for being here today. And I want to get into the story. So let's start from the beginning. What was it like being Marquita growing up?
Whew. Where do we start? Where do we start? Well, first of all, I want to say thank you for having me. I'm so excited to be here today just to share a little bit about my journey, but to also encourage and empower other women to soar into their purpose and their next destination. When I was younger, I remember growing up in a place called 40th Street. I grew up in West Philly. So I used to always reference Will Smith in West Philadelphia, born and raised on a playground. That's where she spent most of her days.
Hey.
So I grew up in West Philadelphia and low income housing. And it was one of those neighborhoods where everybody is home all the time. They may go to school. The kids may go to school, may cut school, lots of fights, all of that. I remember looking out of my bedroom window and seeing the corner boys. So they would be there in the morning when I got up.
Corner boys?
Mm-hmm.
What are corner boys? Are they singing or the dope boys?
Dope boys.
Okay.
They were not singing. They were selling drugs and
Well,
doing whatever.
it could have been Boys to Men. They was on the corner singing. They from Philly.
Not these particular boys.
Oh, goodness.
But they'd be out there in the morning when I was either getting up, getting ready for school, even on the weekends. But then they'd also be there at night. So they were there all day. And they'd be there at night. I'd be going to bed. I was one of those, mama put me in the bed 8, 9 o'clock. And I'd sneak in the window and try to see what was going on. And they'd still be down on the corner. I can get up 11 o'clock at night, midnight. They'd still be on the corner. And so I just say that to say it was one of those environments where that was the norm, where that's kind of what you expected. And, you know, maybe you graduated from high school, maybe you didn't, maybe you went on. Not a lot of people in that particular neighborhood went anywhere beyond high school, again, if they graduated from high school. And so there wasn't a whole lot of examples, I would say, about what to do next and how to dream bigger than being in that environment. So many people had been raised there and had lived there for basically their entire lives and really wasn't going anywhere, which if, you know, everybody has their own pattern, but I just share that because I could have gotten stuck there and I could have thought that that was kind of where I was going to be because that's what I saw. Those were the examples that I had. But thankfully, I actually went to a school outside of the neighborhood. I went to the school in the neighborhood and then outside of the neighborhood. And so then I got exposed to a little bit more and was able to do a little bit more.
So when you went outside the neighborhood, was you one of those who were bused to the white neighborhood? Or you just went to a different school district?
I basically just went to a different school district. And only because it was set up in a way where you could apply to different schools. And as a matter of fact, the middle school that I went to was one of those schools. It was a neighborhood school, meaning you had to live in a certain zone in order to go. So my mom actually signed over custody of me on paper to a relative who lived in that zone so that I could go to school in that zone.
Now, did
So
you live with the relative or did you stay with your mom?
absolutely not. I stayed with my mom.
Okay.
So again, that's why I was just on paper that she gave custody. It was like I remember her going to notarize the paper and turn it into the school board. It was just a piece of paper where they would send my official documents to that address, but I don't even know that I visited the relative. Literally, I still stayed at home with my mom, and I did have to catch the bus, so I just caught public transportation.
Gotcha. So then now what? We have a pretty good childhood, even though, we see the dope boys, you know, we're going to another school district, we're being exposed to something different. So now what? Do we go to college? Do we graduate and go to college, or do we decide not to?
So we graduate, go to college, and then realize that we finished college, but it wasn't easy. So it was a struggle because now I'm in this new environment. So even though I had gone to these other schools and had these other experiences, there was still this question about who am I and where do I fit in? Because my past, my environment was dictating one thing, but everything else that I was seeing looked a little bit different. The people I went to school with, they had much more than I did. They had cars and they had fancy clothes and they had other things that I didn't have. So I still was in an environment where I thought, do I belong here?
Do you
And
belong where? Do you belong in the environment that you were in or the environment where you were going to school?
the environment where I'm going to school.
Okay. So you're kind of like not feeling like you fit in?
Exactly.
So what is that doing to you? Because you're saying you really don't know who you are. So how are you gonna who are you identifying mostly with?
Honestly, I don't know that I ever really answered that question. So it was almost like the chameleon effect where I was just kind of blending in, kind of trying to find my tribe. I'd find myself alone a lot, to be totally honest. And even during the entire time I was in school, it was still the question of who am I? Where do I belong? What do I bring to the table? Spending so much time, a lot of times I felt that I was alone, even though there were people all around me, if that makes any sense.
Oh, absolutely. I think we sometimes still feel like that. I felt like that as an adult. Okay. You got people around me and I'm feeling lonely. I get it.
But it's so interesting because I can't say I haven't felt that way as I got older until I began to do some things different. But as a collegiate, it really impacted my mental health.
Okay.
And there was a point where I had to go to counseling services on campus to try to figure out what was going on because I was up and down so much and trying to fit into these, is what is it, trying to fit a round circle in a square peg?
Mm-hmm.
It was going on for so long that at some point that messes with us emotionally and mentally in a way that we don't even recognize it. So I started having some depression that I didn't even realize because I'm just going through the motions every day.
So
And
like a functional depression.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So tell us what that's like, because I actually went through that myself at some point. I was depressed, but I was going to work and someone had to point that out to me that I was functionally depressed. And I'm like, huh? And so when they start describing it to me, I'm like, oh, wow. And that's when, one of those times where I realized I got to do something different. But kind of tell us, what is that like to be functionally depressed?
The way I'll describe what that was like for me. So
Right.
it's getting up, going to class, going to my organizational meetings. I'm doing things on the outside. I still got on regular clothes. I look decent. But on the inside, everything was broke down. Maybe you would go to my dorm room and things were in a complete mess. Sleeping as much as I can, maybe missing class, potentially even failing assignments. So on the outward appearance, everything looks good, everything looks put together, and I'm still moving, I'm still doing things, but I'm so shut down and broken down inwardly that it's not the same. And when I'm a small frame person anyway, but at one point not eating as much. And like I said, just sleeping as much as I can, missing things because I'm not waking up.
So was it when you went to get some counseling that they pointed this out to you?
My grades, when I
Um,
realized that things were going on with my grades and they were on a downward spiral that I didn't know how to get out of, I realized I needed to figure out what was going on.
so what did you do? How did you figure that out? How did you stop the spiral?
Went to talk to one of my professors and they recommended that I go to student counseling services. So I went over to student counseling services. That's when they said, oh, wait, there's a bigger issue going on. They did a official diagnosis of depression and then sent me home, essentially. It was towards the end of the semester, so they sent me home to finish out the semester. And during that time, I really had to do some internal soul seeking. Where do I belong? What's going to happen next? Do I want to go back? How am I going to go back? And how am I going to make sure that if and when I go back, that I don't go back the same way I am?
So describe that to us. What was that journey like?
Interestingly, it's for me, it's almost like it was almost like a sense of failure.
Mm-hmm.
How did I get this far? Just to kind of go backwards. What's going on? What are people going to think? Nobody wants, and we're talking about mental health, right? So nobody wants to be diagnosed with anything that's just not joy and happiness, right? So it's what are people going to think? Are people going to still accept me? What's my mom going to think? What's my family going to think? So now I'm not just dealing with the diagnosis. I'm not just dealing with what's going on in school. Now I'm dealing with all this other internal pressure that I'm putting on myself, again, mentally. The things that nobody can see. Nobody can see all of this that's going on in my mind. All of this, me feeling like I'm not worthy, me feeling like I'm not enough, me feeling like I'm letting everybody down. So just battling that and trying to figure out how to work through it. I can't say that there was one specific thing that got me through that period, but just letting time go and eventually journaling helped a lot.
So do you feel like time heals wounds?
I think it can for sure.
For sure. But what about the work that you have to put into it? What did journaling do for you? Because everyone heals in different ways.
Mm-hmm.
So what did journaling do for you? What were you journaling? Were you just talking about your feelings every day, or what was going on when you were journaling? Were you telling yourself stories? Were you encouraging yourself?
No, I love all of that. I'm glad you asked the question. As you asked if time heals everything, I was able to respond, but I think everything takes time. And I think all of these things, to get through trauma, to get through pain, to overcome things that have passed, I think it takes time, but I do believe it's all a process. And so we have to give ourselves time to walk through a process. And sometimes we just want to microwave it, pop it in, and automatically we're healed and fixed. But I don't think it's that quick, which is why I think it takes time, but there's work. So journaling is something that is really big on me. And I actually brought one of my journals with me to share. But at that particular, now journaling, let me say, has progressed over the years. But at that point in life, it was just an outlet, which I think is so important. It was just a space to just write how I was feeling. Dear diary, this is how I'm feeling today. This is what I'm thinking today. just to get outside everything that was going on inside. You know, those things that you think and feel, but you can't say it to anybody because you think they're going to judge you. You think they're going to talk about you. You think they're going to laugh at you. And so you don't want to say it. You know, how is somebody going to interpret that? How is somebody going to take that? How are they going to perceive it? I'm not going to say it because I don't want to be judged. I don't want to be let down. So I can say it to myself, and just getting it out is the first part of the process. Just getting it outside of ourselves.
So tell us about this. You said you got the journal with you. So tell us about this journal.
About a year ago, I wrote something called a SOAR journal. And I spent time studying the life of a butterfly. And a butterfly goes through a 4-phase or 4-part metamorphosis process, which essentially starts off as almost nothing, right? It's the caterpillar, but then it has to grow before it can fly. And right. So when I think about that process, I think about life and just kind of what we go through as individuals, what we go through as women, and how there's a lot that people can't see. There's a lot of development. There's a lot that we have to kind of take on, a lot that's covered up. There's a phase of the caterpillar where it's just covered up and you can't really see what's going on the inside, which is kind of a lot of our pain and trauma. But once you release that shedding, you got to release. So kind of talking about that outlet, once you release that shedding, that's when people can see the growth. And not until you release, and not until you let your limbs and everything around you grow, can you do what you were meant to do, or can a butterfly do what it was meant to do and fly? And so in the journal, I kind of described that metamorphosis process. And then I talk about a scriptural or a character in scripture, talk about that process a little bit, and how somebody once didn't realize that they were worth anything and they put so much value on somebody else. But I just kind of pointed out that we have value even if we can't see it. A lot of times other people around us will see it. And then I have some affirmations in there, because a lot of times you ask, what am I saying to myself in a journal? At one point, there's a lot of negative talk, but we've got to get to a point where we transfer the negative talk to positive talk. So I wrote out some affirmations that we can just speak over ourselves every day, even if we don't know where to begin. Just say these couple of things every day. And then the more you say it, the more you begin to believe it.
So I heard you say that a lot of times, I don't know your exact wording, so I'm just going to say it the way I remember. No problem. But you said that people don't know who they are, or they can't see themselves for who they are the way other people can. So sometimes, and I do believe that sometimes we can't see our greatness, but someone else is seeing our greatness, and they're trying to tell us something. So was that ever you, where you weren't seeing, were you what you were capable of? You weren't seeing your greatness, and it took someone else to keep pointing these things out to you? Or did you just know, like, I'm great? Like, how did that work for you?
I wish I could say.
I mean, because some people just be like, I'm the shit's naive, but
no, I wish I could say that it was me. In fact, my husband a few years ago gave me a business card holder, and he had it inscribed on the inside, "I am enough." Ooh. Because he knew that I struggled with seeing my self-worth and knowing that I am enough. And he wanted that to be a constant reminder for me. So my husband and I have been together 20 years. So he would be my greatest cheerleader, that person saying, I see you and I see more. And he's the one that pushes me.
So what happened that you had that, I call it a limiting belief, but the doubt that you're enough? Where did that come from?
If I had to pinpoint it, I would say it's from, you asked me to start by talking about what was going on with me growing up. I would have to say it was my upbringing. And we talked about affirmations. So never really being affirmed as a child and as I was growing up, I think really took a hit on me personally. Meaning, and I talk about, there's another book that I drafted that I wrote, and it was a collaborative book. And one of the things that I talk about in there are daddy issues. So my dad was always in my life, but he wasn't in my home.
Mm-hmm.
And he would always say things like trying to take me to another level, but he never acknowledged where I was.
Okay.
If that makes sense. And so I
It does.
always felt like where I was wasn't enough. I always felt like it wasn't good enough. I always felt like I should have been thinking about more or wanting to do more, because he never celebrated where I was.
Wow. I wonder if it's the era. Because that sounds like my father.
Wow.
Well, he was always, I mean, he was a great man, but he was always trying to take us girls, with all girls, to the next level, but never really saying that where you were, you did a great job. And I mean, he was proud of us. Growing up, he finally was, always telling me, I'm so proud of you. But I always remember this time where I had to write this speech. I had to write something that I had to read in front of the class. And I wrote it and I thought I did a great job. Like, I'm really proud of myself. And I go and I take it to him, and he's basically like, no, you could do better. Like, you could do better than that. You need to dig deeper. I think I was only in the 7th or 8th grade. So I had to been like, I don't know, 11 or 12. And you're telling me I could do better. And here I am, proud of myself that I had done this. And he made me go back and rewrite it. And even though that was a good thing, it was also had some negative impacts on me growing up, that I had to now deal with that same thing of not of perfectionism. Like, what I'm doing is not good enough, and it's got to be better. I could do better, type of thing. Because although I realize now, looking back, he was trying to take me to another level, in that moment as an 11 or 12-year-old, right? I'm
It's not
like,
what you see.
that's not what you think. So, I get it. I get it. I do. So how did you, so we're journaling to kind of come out of this. We've got a husband who is supportive. Tell me, how did you start coming into your purpose? Because I want to talk about this Transform and SOAR Academy that you have, where you are helping women transform their lives. So tell us, how did that come about?
One of the things that is not in my bio on my profiles a lot, you would have to really know me to know this. I don't know why it's not in there, but let me go back a second. So I grew up on the Cosby Show. I'm one of those where every Thursday night, I don't know where you were, but Thursday night at 8:00, I was on Cosby.
Mm-hmm.
And then at 8:30, Different World. Okay.
Yes.
So
I still love A Different World. You can't beat A Different World. Okay.
Exactly.
Want that Whitley and Dwayne love.
Yep. So I was one of those, like, Rudy was my best friend. She didn't know it, but she was like my best friend, because we were the same age, I felt like, during the Cosby Show. And I would like watch the show and picture myself almost as a part of the family, like waiting to be invited to the house just to hang out with the Huxtables. And with that, I admired Claire. Mm-hmm. I admired her role as a mother. I admired her role as a wife, and she was an attorney. So it was great. What that did was planted a seed in me that I wanted to become an attorney. So that kind of will go into what it is that I'm saying. So,
are we kindred spirits? Are you my twin sister and we just now meeting? Go ahead, I'm listening. This is crazy.
So I would just, over the years of watching it and seeing it, that kind of gave me a sense of hope that I can do something different. I can do something more. So we talked about where I grew up. But then in that same bedroom where I was watching the Corner Boys, I was also watching Claire Huxtable. And so it kind of inspired me to want to be an attorney. So I began seeing myself in that role, seeing myself in that position, imagining myself in that position. So I did eventually go to law school, and that wasn't easy. I did not get accepted the first time. Many people don't know that either, but I didn't get accepted the first time that I tried to go. So I tried again a few years later, and I'm a practicing attorney now in family law. And
What? This is not in your bio at
it's
all.
not, it is not in my bio. And actually, since I wrote that bio, I've actually gotten an even greater position. So I'm a general magistrate with the court. So I'm in a quasi judicial position. And these are things that I've visualized, my positions that I've visualized. So I think that's critical.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's vision is really important. And that's one of the things I focus a lot on in Transforming SOAR is visualizing where you want to be. And a part of that goes back to the writing piece and writing out what that looks like. It's one thing to see it, but now let's write about it and let's describe it and let's begin to manifest it.
Man, I could just sit right here and talk to you about this. I promise you, I'm not making this up. My friends will tell you. I wanted to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer. I ain't gonna tell my story. We telling you a story, but I wanted to be a lawyer. I didn't become the lawyer because I ended up doing something else. But I need to know because you said you're still practicing law. So is law your purpose, or is transforming women your purpose and law is just your job? Like, how is that working that you visioned yourself as this lawyer, but even though you're a lawyer, you are now helping women, you are helping marriages, you're helping people with their finances. Like, how does that all work that you go from lawyer to coaching?
I love that question because I believe that when you get clear on where it is that you want to be, and that's why that vision is important, and that's why that writing is important. But when you get clear on where you want to be, things just begin to fall in alignment. So I mentioned that I'm a family law attorney, and I mentioned it because it aligns with what it is that I do. When we think about it, right? I'm helping, and family law is a little bit different because a lot of the cases are dissolving marriages, but it's also bringing families together in other areas. It's also establishing paternity and making sure that the kids can spend time with both parents. And when parents aren't available, giving them another place to live. What that looks like in my coaching world is I'm helping women to really understand who we are at the root. Because what I'm seeing in the courtroom is marriages are dissolving because women get to a point where I've given so much of myself and my relationship that I don't know who I am at the core. And so now when we get 30, 40 years old and we've raised kids, we're, midlife raising kids, and we're like, wait, well, who am I? I've been a mom so long. I've been a wife so long. I've been a employee so long. I don't even know what my favorite color is.
So what, in your own perspective or thoughts, why does this happen? Because I think I'm seeing this quite a bit. How is it that we get so consumed in being a mother, a wife, a daughter, a friend, an employee, and we forget about ourselves and we don't really learn who we are? Like, how does this vicious cycle keep happening that we don't, are we raised this way? Like, I'm just trying to figure out why as women do we keep finding so many of us in that position where we lose ourselves? That's my first question. And then I want to know, is it possible to still find yourself while married? Like, can you reconcile and still find yourself and make this marriage work? So I'm gonna be quiet. I'm gonna let you talk.
Yes and yes. Why do we as women do that? I think we do it because at some point, and we kind of talked about this a little bit, at some point, we didn't necessarily have a sense of self. So if I've lived, I'll use myself. If I've lived a chameleon life for the first 20, 25 years of my life, I'm so used to fitting into everybody else's world. I'm so used to meeting everybody else's expectations, parents included, that I don't really know what mine are. And so when I get into a relationship and he says, oh, I think we should do this, or oh, why don't we do that? I'm like, okay, because I'm so used to going with the flow. I'm so used to fitting in, and it feels good. He likes it. We as women are nurturers, so we want to make them happy. So we kind of fall in line with it. Meanwhile, we're forgetting that there's a piece of us that we're leaving behind, not on purpose, but we've just kind of focused on somebody else. And then we get pregnant, and now we have a baby, and now that baby takes all of our time and attention. So we're pouring, pouring, and pouring, and at the same time depleting, depleting, depleting. And so self-care is an important thing for me that I focus on as well, is teaching women how to have self-care.
What is self? Because sometimes I think that we not you, but I see that term used all the time in social media about self-care. But every time they talk about self-care, they're always talking about getting their nails done and their hair done. But then, so what really does it mean to have self-care?
For me, it's I'm laughing because I want to say taking care of yourself, like duh, right? That's so I can't say that. For me, I really believe it's getting to the root of who you are as an individual and finding your happy and doing that stuff. So my happy may not be getting my hair done, but my happy may be watching a TV show that I enjoy, not one that everybody else around me enjoys. It looks like identifying and spending time with my own thoughts and saying, this is what makes me happy. Being able to take a bubble bath and not have to worry about cooking dinner or putting the kids down or going to a meeting, getting on a call, whatever it is. It's just taking some time to put yourself first, because I think we as women, again, put everybody else first. So self-care for me is really saying I matter. First of all, saying I exist, and then saying I matter. And so for this moment, I'm going to be selfish and I'm going to think about me first.
All right, now, I'll be all over the place. We're going to have to go back to my question.
Okay.
Can a woman find herself without losing her marriage? And I think about this because I'm a reality TV junkie, and there's this reality TV show called Waka. Well, what the F? I don't know. Waka Flocka, the rapper, and his wife, and there's this episode where she was feeling lost and disconnected, and she goes to see this life coach, and it's everything that you're saying about how she's spent so much of her life taking care of other people, had a child, had been married, went from one marriage to not straight into another marriage, but now she's married again. And so her life has been consumed taking care of other people and not taking care of herself. And she didn't really know who she was, but now she's married and she needs to find herself. And the life coach tells her, that you need to find out who you are. And so the question that they didn't answer on the show really, which is, how do you find yourself and still be able to hold the marriage together?
I think that is a wonderful question. And I very quickly said yes a few minutes ago, but that's exactly what my husband Oliver and I do is in Root Group for Change. We rapidly help to strengthen marriages and money, because we understand that a lot of what's happening in marriages, a lot of it underlying is money. People don't really talk about that, but it's in a marriage, both people, I think, tend to lose themselves and don't know how to find themselves. And so they just separate. And so we're trying to decrease the divorce rate, which is kind of why we exist. But I think we focus a lot on communication. And so I would say the first thing is learning how to communicate with yourself first, being honest with yourself that I am losing myself, that I'm not happy, that something has changed, but then learning how to communicate with your spouse. I think if you have a strong marriage anyway, then you can communicate with your spouse and say, I'm feeling off, something's not right. And your spouse will help to work with you to get it back on board. That doesn't happen in a lot of situations because we already don't have that foundation of communication in the marriage. So I can't go to my spouse and say I'm off because he's like, well, what do you mean? Everything is good. But if you can appropriately communicate, then he won't say that, and instead he'll say, well, what's going on? How can we work together to make it work?
So how do you appropriately communicate? Like, okay, well, I'll let you answer that first. How do you what does it mean to appropriately communicate?
So that might look different for every couple. So I can't just give one answer, but I will say a lot of it first, and we've been saying this the whole time we've been chatting, a lot of it comes back to knowing who you are. So first you have to know who you are, and you have to know who the other person is, because you'll communicate with the other person based on how they need to be communicated with. But you also have to know who you are to make sure that it comes out the right way. So there's a delivery, and knowing how to deliver information, and then knowing when to deliver information. Because when you think about it, communication is just an exchange of thoughts and ideas between two people. So whatever you're trying to communicate, you have to know what it is you're trying to communicate, which is to understanding myself first, because I have to be strong enough within myself to say, I have to get this out of myself. I have to speak up for myself. A lot of times we can't find ourselves in marriage because we don't even realize that we've lost ourselves. So we got to spend some time focused on self, realize, self-reflecting, journaling, writing, thinking about where we are, but then figuring out, now how can I express those words? How can I express my thoughts and feelings to him? Who is he or who is she? How do they take in information? And then once you know that, then you say, okay, this is what I need to release, and this is how I can best release it, because I know that they can receive it this way. So that's general, but it's possible.
So you said you and your husband been married for 20 years. So have you always been this way? Like, or did you all kind of like grow and become into this together to now you say, you know what, this is how we did it. Now let's go help other people do it too. So tell me what that was like for you and your husband to kind of morph into and make it happen for yourselves.
Woo, child. How much time
is that a part two? Becoming in marriage. I already got someone coming to do a part two on becoming a wife. So is that a part two of becoming in marriage?
Possibly. Yes, to the latter part of the question, we did not start off this way. We morphed into this because, like many couples, we've had our ups and downs. It has not been peachy keen the whole time. I ain't even gonna lie to you. So we have moments where I'm like, I'm out of here. I'm going to do me. I'm going to find me. I'm going to figure out what I want to do. You keep the kids. I'm out of here.
And what made you stay? What made you stay? What made you not walk away? What made you not give up?
Because you asked me a question about purpose. See, it all comes back. I keep coming back. But you asked me a question about purpose. And I know that my purpose is to empower women to be who they were called and created to be. And that includes their role as a wife and a mother. So I specifically am called to women who are wives and or mothers. You don't have to be both, but one or the other. And when you know what it is that you're called to do, then even when you want to veer off, even when you want to give up, you always come back to it, because that's what's deeply rooted on the inside of you, so you can't get away from it. You can't get away from the things that you're called to do because that's what you were created and designed for. So when I wanted to give up in my marriage, it became clear that marriage and married women were a part of my calling, and what I was going through was in order for me to help other women on the other side of it, because I also can't help people overcome something that I don't quite understand.
Gotcha.
So that was that's pretty much why I stayed, because another part of me said, "You ain't going nowhere because there's work in this area." That was part of it. And then my husband's like, "No, let's try to figure it out."
Ooh.
When I
So
tried
how
to
did you
walk away,
go?
he wouldn't let me.
How did you go from lawyer to knowing this is your purpose? Like, I know you still practice law, but you said this was your purpose, the women and mothers, and helping them transform and helping them heal and helping them become who they're supposed to be. So what was, when did that go off in your mind? What was that moment that you knew, like, I got to do this? This is what I was meant to do.
The more I see women struggling, and from the court perspective, the more I can see women coming in, the more I can see the issues that they were having. And I could see where the breakdown was. The more I said, there's work to be done within women. And so while I won't disconnect the legal side of me, there's an internal piece that has to be developed in women that's going to ultimately, they kind of go hand in hand. It
Mm-hmm.
was what I saw in one place said there's more to do on the other side.
So
And so
you
if I
saw a
can heal more
problem
women,
and you came with the solution.
yes,
Absolutely. I love it. So I just want to make sure they out there are getting this. Your purpose, a lot of times your purpose is pulled out of what you see as an issue that's bothering you. And you like, I gotta solve this issue. So is that what it was like for you? You like I just can't keep just only doing this part of it. I want to help this part of it. And then that's kind of like becomes a passion and you created a solution.
that's exactly it. When you even scroll on social media, when you hear people saying, "I want more," even an easy example, people say, "I want to lose weight."
Mm-hmm.
Right. And then it's like, okay, well, just go run. Well, stop eating sugar. Just, go work out. And it seems easy for somebody who's doing it. But when you take a step back and say, why aren't these things being done? When I hear women say, I wanted to start a business, I want to write a book, I want to go back to school, I want to even get my high school diploma, I want to buy a house. Somebody like me whose vision is important says, well, just do it. Realize it's not easy to just do it, but there are some steps like the vision and the writing and allowing things to manifest. Said, okay, Marquita, these women can't do it because it's not that simple. Because if it was that simple, then it would already be done, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
what can you do to help walk women through the journey to be able to do it, and figuring out what is limiting people from losing weight, what's limiting people from buying a house, what's limiting people from applying for the job. And a lot of that is just internal work that needs to be done. So me wanting to walk women through that process so that they can be all that they desire to be, because I think it's possible.
So tell me, I want to know, with all the success stories that you've had, what is probably one of your most memorable clients, without like telling names or anything, but one of your most memorable clients that came to you um, with needing some help in the transformation that you saw that just really made you say, I made the right choice. This, this is what I was meant to do. Do you have one of those where you just kind of like, man, I can't believe, the transformation that she made, and that just really told you you were doing the right thing?
The first person that comes to mind, I don't know if it's most memorable, but the first person that comes to mind is reminds me of why we do it and why we stick with it, even when it doesn't feel fruitful, right?
Mm-hmm.
A woman I connected with at one point a couple years ago, and we're walking through some steps, trying to just getting out of a divorce, trying to walk through some processes to self-identify what is it that you want to do, and trying to help her get back on her feet and get into those places, trying to help her with her finances. And at the time, initially, she kept saying, okay, but then I wouldn't see a lot of follow-up. She kept saying I'll do it, but wasn't really doing a lot of follow-up. And I could have easily said, okay, well, she's not my cup of tea, or I'm not her cup of tea, and so I'm just going to move on. But I stayed with her and, kept following up with her, and it got to the point where now she's gotten, for the first time, is living on her own, where before she had been living with other people and had been renting space from other people, but now she's got her own living situation that she's financing on her own, using our Regroup for Change financial resources to help kind of maintain financially, and has stopped doing some of the career work that she was doing before, and is actually now doing work that she enjoys doing, that is allowing her to be a better grandmother and a better mother. And just seeing her from where she was, a lot of self-doubt, a lot of insecurity, a lot of not knowing whether or not she could move forward, not trusting herself, not wanting to rely on herself, and now seeing her independent, relying on herself, and really enjoying life at a whole nother level, says that's why we do what we do. Even when it doesn't look good, even when it doesn't feel good, we do it and we keep going because we're making a difference and we're helping to transform lives.
Absolutely. I love it. So let's talk about these books. I mean, you're just amazing me because we're a lawyer, we're a woman coach, we're a marriage coach, and we're an author. So let's tell me about these books, because you've got 3 books under your belt, and so tell us about those books.
So I mentioned the journal. That's one of them, which is just helping. It's a place for people to release what's inside. And so it's really their journaling space to release. And then there are quotes throughout, that just some motivational quotes throughout, because I believe that we all need some motivation and enlightenment. Another book is the collaborative book that I mentioned, Girl, Let's Get Over It Together, is a collaboration of 7 women who come together, talk about stories of loss. Sometimes your loss may be loss of a relationship. It may be loss of a loved one. It may be loss of purpose. My specific chapter is talking about loss of self, right? Which is what we've been talking about. When you feel like you don't know who you were, it actually talks about a point where I thought I was losing my marriage. But a lot of that had to do with me. And so when I had to go back and find me, I walked through 5 steps that I took to kind of heal myself, which ultimately helped to heal my marriage. So that one is Girl, Let's Get Over It Together. And then my husband and I co-authored a book, How Our Savings Went from $0 to $40,000. So we went from, when we relocated from Pennsylvania to Florida, we literally, on the way on 95, were calling a creditor because there was a lien on his credit report that we didn't know about. So we couldn't even get into our low income apartment at the time because we had this lien. So we're on 95 trying to figure out how to pay off a lien, and then staying in a Motel 8 for a couple of nights until we can get into the apartment. So we went from that situation to having no savings because we had no money, to actually having $40,000 in an account at one time, while we were still paying bills, still taking care of 3 children that were in competitive activities, purchased a home, and doing other things. And so we just talk about, in that book, we talk about the 5 steps, 5 very basic steps that we went through that helped us to save money, live the life that we wanted to live while we were still able to vacation and still able to just live a life that we enjoy and to pass on to our children as well.
So before we close this out, I like to always ask everyone, what would Marquita today, what's the lesson learned that she would tell Marquita at 16?
Spend some time finding you. Oh, especially at 16. At 16 was really the time where I literally did anything and everything trying to fit in, trying to figure out where I belong. And that set me on a road of doing that for years and not really fitting in, which ultimately always made me stand out and always made me want to isolate myself and not be a part of groups and crowds, because I always felt like the eyeball out. Or it led me on a path of self-destructive behavior because I spent so much time doing things that I thought would make me cool that really didn't. I wish I would have spent more time then understanding who I was and really thinking about who I was going to be in the future, and beginning to visualize myself in that role then, so that I could start taking steps then to become who I was meant to be.
Wonderful. And I just got to ask this, even though that was supposed to be the last statement. I told you I'll just be all over the place. So, because y'all say things and then I just my mind gets to wondering and thinking, and then I have questions. But when you talk about being the oddball out and not fitting in, do you feel like that do you look back on it now and realize or know that you weren't maybe supposed to, because you were destined for something more?
Oh, I was just about to say, it's so funny that when I said it like it was a bad thing. But what I've come to realize so many years later is that I wasn't created to fit in. I was created to be different. I was created to be unique. And so now I can celebrate that, because I realize that I was designed to be set apart for something more. And so while I thought I was supposed to be fitting in, and always felt bad because I didn't fit in, I wasn't supposed to.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely.
It took me a long time to figure that out.
Why does it take us such a long time to figure out? Listen, y'all out there who don't feel like you fit in, you're not supposed to.
No, it took me long, like until recently, like to realize you did all of that for what? You ain't nothing to do with you. With your purpose.
It's a process, and like you kept saying, it's all connected. It's all connected, and you can go back and you can look over your life and you can see how all the pieces are connected and they relate and they come together I believe it starts to come together when you got that vision, you figure out who you are, you figure out what your purpose is, and then you start to realize that all of these things happen to bring you to this point. And you wouldn't get to that point if you had not have gone through those things, if you had not have felt those things, if you had not have seen those things, because all of those are a part of you becoming who you were supposed to be.
Absolutely. I love it.
So I want to thank you. Thank you so much for being on here. Before we close out, I want to let you all know that remember, where you are is not where you have to be. Your path does not define you. You defined you. So heal, transform, and pursue you.